Canadian youth unemployment rates are reaching levels usually only seen during a recession. Data released by Statistics Canada shows that the youth unemployment rate for Canadians aged 15 to 24 reached 14.5% last month. That's the highest it's been in over a decade, excluding the pandemic. For more on what's behind this growing number, we're joined by Andrew Grantham. He's a senior economist with CIBC. Good to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
As we just set up, unemployment for young Canadians has hit 14.5%, significantly higher than the national average, which sits at 7.1%. Why are we seeing this higher unemployment rate for our young Canadians?
Well, that's a great question. It's really difficult for young Canadians at the moment. Now, unfortunately, when we do have a weak labour market, a rise in unemployment rate, it is typically young people who find it the hardest to get jobs, because young people are the new flow of labour into the labour market. They're young people looking for a part-time job while they study, or maybe they're new graduates who are looking for their first full-time job. So they are always the people who are presenting the new supply into the labour market. So when the labour market is weak, and people are not hiring, then unfortunately young people do often see their unemployment rates rise more than the national average. What's been very surprising about the current situation, though, is just how much that youth unemployment rate has risen relative to the national average. The youth unemployment rate, as you see, is at levels that are typically only seen during recessionary periods, for example, after the 2008-2009 financial crisis.
Last week, the Conservative Party made a lot of headlines pointing to the company's hiring of temporary foreign workers as a driving point for youth unemployment. I'm going to play that for anybody who might have missed it, and then we'll chat out of it.
Why is it that they're shutting our own youth out of jobs and replacing them with low-wage temporary foreign workers from poor countries who are ultimately being exploited?
But here's the question. The number of temporary foreign workers in this country is actually going down, but unemployment for young levels is going up. So what is driving the youth unemployment? Fill in that gap for us.
Yeah, and often with economics, it's supply and demand. It's not just that supply side of the economy. And I think if we had this discussion a year ago, let's say, when the non-permanent resident numbers were at their peak, then you could, make the conclusion that a lot of this was driven by the supply side. We had too many people coming into the country too quickly, and they were chasing too few jobs. But what we've seen over the last year is that we've had some restrictions come in on those non-permanent residents. That supply of new labour is not growing as quickly, but yet this youth unemployment rate is still rising. So there must be something else that explains this. One of the other things that we've seen as well is that this is not just a Canadian phenomenon. We are seeing elevated levels of youth unemployment in other countries, for example, parts of Europe, and even in the US, where the overall labour market is actually quite strong. And obviously those countries have not seen those big increases in student numbers, non-permanent residents. So there is something else at play here. When we look at the data, we do think that there's a little bit of evidence that maybe some of the technological changes we're seeing, including AI, are taking away some of the jobs that students or recent graduates would typically do.
Yeah, those would be those entry-level positions. Andrew, I want to ask you something that comes up a lot in this conversation. Is it just the fact that the jobs that were being filled by temporary foreign workers, ones that often require a uniform or a very entry-level or service-level positions, that young people just don't want those jobs?
Well, some of them they do want, but on a temporary basis, right? So they do want those, but they want to do them temporarily while they study. And so if you're an employer and you have the potential for someone to do that permanently rather than on a temporary basis, then obviously they would jump at the opportunity for that. But as I said, we have seen those restrictions on population growth really come into effect over the last year. So that doesn't seem to really explain all of what we're seeing in terms of that very elevated youth unemployment rate.
Recent data also shows us that back in 2022, the retail sector accounted for 30% of youth employment. This year it was less than 25%. So if young Canadians can't find work in sectors that they usually are welcomed in, where else should they be looking for work?
Yeah, and that's one of the areas where we have seen some changes in technology. We've got self-checkouts now rather than having to have someone scan, our items through. And that is taking away some of those temporary jobs, including, when it comes to students. So I think, what students have to do is, just realize that kind of any work experience on your resume is good work experience, and so that will be helpful longer term. But it is very difficult at the moment because for young people, these changes in technology do seem to be taking away some of the jobs that they would typically do either temporarily or as a first job coming out of university.
It is tough out there. They've got jobs that are disappearing. They've got permanent jobs that are being held on to longer by Canadians who are not in the youth employment sector. So it is a tough market out there. Andrew Grantham, I appreciate you taking a look at those numbers for us.
Thank you very much.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.